Welcome everyone to the Lord of Mysteries novel summary series on AniMonolith. After hearing the name Mr. Fool, Audrey and Alger cannot hide their respect for Joe. Then Audrey and Alger politely ask the Joe to become witnesses to their transaction. Of course, Joe has met this wish. Then Alger said the location where Audrey needed to deliver 100 milliliters of demon shark blood was the Hero and Sea Bar in Pelican City in the White Rose area in Pritz Harbor. Here Audrey will find the innkeeper William James and tell him that the item the captain wants is available. After receiving the goods and checking them, Alger will send the recipe for the visionary potion to Audrey. Another option is that at present, Alger will tell Audrey the formula and then she will send the item he needs to the Corjo location. Then Audrey chose to listen to the recipe right in the presence of Mr. Fool. Because she came up with an extremely bold thought, that is, if Mr. Fool becomes a witness, he will be bound to their transaction, which means they will have the opportunity to gather in this mysterious place again or more. After thinking about it, Audrey frankly stated her opinion that she hoped Mr. Fool would continue the experiments, as Joe previously called it, to explain why he dragged Audrey and Alger into the strange gray fog. Hearing this, Alger quickly spoke up in favor of this opinion with very sharp arguments as follows. Firstly, Audrey's background is that of a prestigious lady, so she will have a lot of power. As for Alger, he is confident that he also has knowledge and influence in many fields, so he can be useful. Third is Mr. Fool, no matter how talented is, he will still have to face stronger people, so with the help of Audrey and Alger, Mr. Fool will be able to solve the problem more easily. When saying these things, Alger of course had careful calculations. Because Alger thinks Mr. Fool has mystical powers, so if he wants he can summon them at any time and they cannot refuse. But instead of being in such a passive position, Alger will find opportunities for himself to be more proactive by voluntarily cooperating with Mr. Fool. Of course, Audrey was the one who initiated the idea of Mr. Fool creating periodic gatherings that also do not refute anything Alger just said. However, Audrey was still surprised that Alger had already guessed her identity as a noble lady just after meeting her. As for Joe, after carefully listening to Audrey and Alger's suggestions, he felt that holding gatherings had both benefits and disadvantages. The benefit that Joe sees ahead is that it is possible through Audrey and Alger's power and profound knowledge in the mystical field to find a way to return to Earth. At the same time, if problems arise in the real world, that is, in everyday life as Klein, then Joe can completely take advantage of this couple to solve the problem. However, Joe is also worried that if he meets too much, his true identity may be discovered. Because up to now, Joe is still present in the minds of Audrey and Alger as a mysterious person with the title Mr. Fool. After careful thought, Joe agreed to the proposal of the two of them, but at the same time, he also made his principles. Firstly, the Joe will set the meeting time for 3 p.m. on Mondays of the week, so Audrey and Alger can know in advance how to prepare and not worry about being dragged into the fog unexpectedly. However, Audrey and Alger must be alone during this time. The second thing Joe mentioned was that he didn't want to take advantage of Audrey and Alger's support, so he would do something in return. Thirdly, if Joe can complete his experiment, which implies a safe return to Earth, then Audrey and Alger can leave the gatherings. After listening to what Mr. Fool said, Audrey was originally a young lady who was protected and loved by her family and was only 17 years old, so she was still inexperienced, so she could not hide his excitement at Mr. Fool's gathering. However, Audrey also came up with a very smart idea, which is that people will use nicknames at gatherings. Because this can help Audrey hide her true identity when facing Mr. Fool. Audrey then quickly said that she would choose a nickname from the tarot deck because Joe's nickname was Mr. Fool, which is also a tarot card. Then Audrey chose her nickname, Justice, which is one of the 20 main cards of the tarot deck. Responding to Audrey's suggestion, Alger also quickly chose his nickname, the Hanged Man. While Audrey and Alger said their nicknames, Joe still maintained a calm attitude and observed everything, but on the other hand, he felt quite amused with Audrey's bold idea when she thought that the three people were the founders of the tarot club. Audrey then suddenly changed the subject to the fact that the tarot deck was originally invented by Roselle Gustave, but there were rumors that this deck of cards did not affect fortune-telling. At the same time, Audrey believes that fortune-telling originates from each person's self. Because everyone has their spirituality, they can communicate with the spirit world and communicate with information related to themselves at a higher level. It's just that ordinary people can't realize that, so of course they can't understand reminders from supernatural forces. However, when people use divination tools, this information will be presented more clearly thanks to those tools. The simplest example is dreaming and dream reading. Alger, after observing that Joe did not reach after Audrey's words, so he gave his rebuttal. Because Alger believes that tarot cards are truly a tool used for fortune-telling. It is often used as a symbol or rather as a type of element that helps people understand the reminder more accurately. After listening to Alger's rebuttal, Audrey did not show any object. On the contrary, she even agreed with his opinion. However, Audrey also wants to add some information about the tarot deck. In fact, Roselle the Great created another secret deck, symbolizing unknown power, with a total of 20 cards. After completing it, he based it on inventing 22 main tarot cards to play. After presenting the unconfirmed rumor, Audrey looked towards Joe with expectant eyes to receive the Corjo answer. However, Joe looked at Alger, currently known by the nickname the Hanged Man, as if waiting for him to answer this question, as if he wanted Joe to test Alger's abilities. Then Alger solemnly said that Roselle Gustav had looked at Stone Slab. From there, he created a secret deck of 22 cards to contain the mysteries of the 22 pathways of God. While listening to the conversation between Audrey and Alger, Joe still maintained a calm appearance, but in reality, he was silently suffering from a terrible headache, like when he finished the ritual and was pulled into a strange fog. This secret. As the pain became more and more obvious, Joe announced the disbandment of today's gathering. Of course, he did not forget to remind Audrey and Alger about the next gathering. Although Audrey and Alger still had many things to discuss with Joe, they quickly disappeared. Because the two bright red stars closely related to Audrey and Alger were affected by Joe. Right after that, Joe also returned to his room. Temporarily ignoring the shock after returning to reality, Joe quickly went to his desk to get his watch to check the current time. Then he discovered that the time spent in the mysterious fog was similar to the time outside. Then he carefully thought about not performing the ritual arbitrarily anymore to avoid complicated problems. Even if he wasn't careful, he could lose his life carelessly. However, Joe also feels lucky to have had help from Miss Justice and the Hanged Man. While gathering more knowledge in this world to find a way to return to Earth, Joe decided that he would truly live as Klein Moretti from now on. Then Klein thought in a more positive direction to temporarily erase the worries in his heart. And while Klein thought about his old world and the magic of the gathering between three people with three different identities, coming from far away, Klein burst out laughing. Because he realized there were similarities between the gathering in the mysterious fog and people in various countries chatting about many things through online apps. Meanwhile, in the waters of Sonia, on a sailboat with an old appearance, Alger suddenly appeared at the bow of the boat in the exact position before being pulled by a bright red light into the strange foggy space. That's strange. However, the glass bottle containing Alger's mysterious mixture suddenly broke, along the snowflakes contained in the bottle also dissolved as if they had never existed. After witnessing this unusual incident, Alger was very surprised, but he temporarily ignored it because he still had work to do. While walking to the boat compartment, Alger suddenly encountered a man with blonde hair and wearing a shirt embroidered with a lightning bolt like Alger. When he saw Alger, the blonde man seriously bowed to him according to pirate protocol. Of course, Alger also calmly responded with a similar action. Then Alger entered deep inside the ship's cabin to a room whose door was not closed. There Alger saw the ship's captain looking like a skeleton sitting helplessly behind a desk with countless valuable objects. Then the captain criticized Alger with an extremely fierce look, and at the same time, he also affirmed that he would never submit to Alger. Hearing that, Alger did not appear agitated when being attacked, but on the contrary, he responded to the captain's opposition. However, soon Alger came closer and quickly grabbed his neck. On the back of Alger's hand, sharp scales like those of a fish suddenly appeared. No matter how fiercely the captain protested, Alger remained unaffected. He even lifted him and threw him against the wall with extremely terrible strength. As soon as it was under Alger's impact, the wall immediately shattered, and the strong, fishy smell of the sea rushed straight into the room. After finishing dealing with his opponent, Alger calmly used a handkerchief to clean up the traces and then quickly destroyed the evidence into the deep blue sea. Just then a man with blonde hair walked in and asked what just happened. Hearing that, Alger calmly said that the captain had run away, and at the same time he lied that he still had superhuman strength that made him unable to resist. Before Alger's report, the blonde man comforted him that everything was not so bad. Because they found an ancient ghost ship and a relic of the Tudor Empire. So no matter what happens, they will not be punished. Of course, Alger also agreed with this opinion, and at the same time thought that searching for the captain who had fled into the deep sea was too risky, because the sea was currently rough. After discussing the captain, Alger looked towards the wall that had a large hole broken from the collision with the previous captain and was now gradually recovering. This did not surprise Alger at all because, on this ancient ship, there were still many more mysterious things, such as the fact that there were no sailors on board but the ship still kept moving as if someone was watching. Very proficient control. Witnessing the magic of the ship reminded Alger that Mr. Fool has mystical powers, and this makes him feel extremely hopeful about the future because he feels that a new era has begun. At the same time, at the mansion located in the Queen's Quarter in Backlund City of Lone Kingdom, Audrey is still skeptical about the fact that she has just returned from a strange space, after meeting a magical man, named as Mr. Fool. However, a broken ancient bronze mirror was placed on the table as if to confirm that everything had happened. Not only that, Audrey also discovered that on the back of her hand, a mark appeared in the shape of a star emitting a bright red light. However, this mark quickly disappeared as if hidden in her skin. Knowing that she was not dreaming, Audrey was extremely happy and celebrated with an ancient spirit dance that was only passed down in royal courts. At this moment, someone suddenly knocked on the door. Audrey immediately stopped all movements and calmly asked who the other person was. After finding out that it was her maid Annie, Audrey immediately let the maid in. When Annie saw the lady's mirror broken, she was extremely surprised and asked who was the culprit who caused everything. Hearing that, Audrey calmly blamed the dog Susie, which was a gift from her father. Of course, Annie did not forget to remind Audrey to retrain the dog because pampering it too much would make it disobedient. Of course, Audrey quickly agreed. Then Annie did not forget that her main task was to prepare costumes for Audrey. However, because Audrey kept making choices that were very arbitrary and even outdated compared to the status and wealth of the Hall family, Annie was extremely busy. Then the work of preparing Audrey's costumes and makeup was completed. At the appointed time, Earl Hall, Audrey's father, immediately appeared at the door to welcome Audrey. Then father and son happily went together to an important event that was about to happen. And at the Royal Naval Base on Oak Island in Pritz Harbor, Audrey was extremely surprised to witness an extremely giant warship emitting a sparkling metallic light. Compared to the other warships docked at the port, this warship is truly completely separate, just like between gods and ordinary people. When they saw the battleship, the crowd nearby, including the nobility and ministers, became extremely excited. Of course, Audrey understood why everyone was so excited because the battleship was the result of great human creativity in the journey to explore and conquer the vast ocean. Then the nobility and the ministers gradually calmed down and stabilized their posture to be as dignified as possible. From afar, everyone saw a huge object flying in mid-air with an extremely large, majestic appearance and fully equipped with state-of-the-art equipment and modern appliances. The king and his family took a flying boat to visit the Royal Naval Base with an extremely noble and majestic appearance. The crest was placed vertically on the flying boat with the judge sword at its hilt, along with ruby crowns on both sides of the canopy that reflected the sun. This is a long-lived symbol of the Augustus family. Its date may date back even before the 5th century. Then the flying boat gradually descended in anticipation and enthusiastic welcome from everyone. However, Audrey could only stand from afar and watch because she was not yet 18 years old, so according to Lone Kingdom's rules, she was not yet qualified to be held by the Queen's debutante ball. From there, Audrey officially entered the upper class and royal family at social parties, or in many other important matters. However, Audrey did not pay attention to this issue, because until the introduction ceremony, she would not be able to meet the royal family members, meaning she would not have to face the princes. While Audrey was still immersed in her thoughts, the royal knights quickly got off the flying boat and formed two very serious rows. Looking at their full body armor, Audrey was extremely confused. In the current era when guns, artillery shells as well as steam and machinery are on the rise, some people are still loyal to heavy, inconvenient outfits like this. However, Audrey was also attracted by the shiny black color emanating from the armor, as if it were made from some special metal. Then Audrey suddenly thought of the Royal Punishment Knight nickname that she had heard her father mention to his friends. After King George III and the Queen along with all the princes and princesses appeared, the welcoming ceremony officially began. The person presiding over this ceremony is current Prime Minister Aguisid Negan, a member of the Conservative Party and a man of prestigious aristocratic background, currently holding the position of Lord. His younger brother Pallas Negan currently holds the title of Duke and is also an important supporter of the Conservative Party. Then, upon receiving the signal from King George III, Aguisid solemnly informed everyone about the giant warship anchored in the harbor. Through Aguisid's words, Audrey learned that the warship was 101 meters long and 21 meters wide, had a high-class hull design, was covered with 457 millimeters thick steel, and weighed 10,060 tons. The front and rear have 4 doors for the 305 millimeters main gun. In addition, there are 6 rapid-fire guns, 12 of the 6 side guns, 18 machine gun doors, and 4 torpedo tubes, and the speed can reach 16 knots. After showing off the prestige of the battleship's marvelousness, Prime Minister Aguisid respectfully invited King George III to name it. Hearing that, the king thought carefully and named the warship Pritz because it would depart from Pritz Harbor. Then, as soon as the warship was named by the king, it began to move out to sea. Following the journey of the battleship Pritz, Prime Minister Aguisid affirmed that the 7 pirates claiming to be generals, along with the 3 pirates claiming to be kings, would be destroyed. Aguisid even believes that no matter if the pirates own an ancient ghost ship or possess any mysterious supernatural powers, they will not be able to defeat the battleship, Pritz. Hearing that, Aguisid's secretary wondered how they would respond if the pirates created a similar armored ship. However, Aguisid replied with great confidence that his opponent would never be able to do this. To create an armored ship like this, it is necessary to combine 20 large-scale iron and steel factories, the Backlund Cannon Research Institute, 60 scientists from the Research Institute, and many senior engineers. Need 2 royal shipyards and nearly 100 component factories attached to it. Needed a navy, a boat-building committee, a cabinet, an eminent king with a sharp and steadfast eye, and a country with an iron and steel output of 1,200,000 tons a year. This means that the pirates' limited financial and material resources can never be matched. So the Prime Minister of the Lone Kingdom was confident that the age of battleships and cannons had come. Far away from the Pritz Harbor area, in a simple motel room, Klein was in a state of confusion after returning from the mysterious fog. Then he saw 4 black dots appear on the back of his hand, forming a small square. After that, these 4 dots gradually disappeared, but Klein still firmly believed that they were still in his body waiting for a suitable opportunity. After thinking carefully, Klein suddenly came up with a guess. The 4 dots correspond to the 4 dishes placed in the 4 corners of the room when performing the ritual to change destiny. This means that from now on, Klein does not need to prepare dishes anymore, but only needs to reuse existing items. However, this is all just speculation, so Klein still needs to observe more. At the same time, Klein also believes that he must be more careful when doing anything related to occultism and supernatural mysteries to avoid getting into trouble. While his mind was still working productively, Klein's body suddenly went on strike. Because he was too tired after spending time in that strange space. After waking up from a long sleep, Klein went to the desk and took out his father's souvenir watch to check the time. He discovered that it was already 12:30 p.m., so his body was exhausted due to hunger. Then Klein quickly collected 4 slices of barley bread that were placed in the 4 corners of the room to make the lunch menu. However, the current problem is not that there is no food, but that the food is too dry and difficult to swallow. So Klein unconsciously looked towards the cabinet where the goat meat that Melissa asked to buy was placed. However, he tried to control his hunger to wait for his sister to return. While wondering how to handle today's menu, Klein suddenly remembered the small amount of potatoes he had bought, so he quickly went into the kitchen to process them into a simple boiled potato dish, along with a soup seasoned liberally for flavor. Afterward, Klein enjoyed a delicious home-cooked meal. Once he had recharged enough energy, Klein sat at his desk to calmly consider his future direction. Klein first thought that he needed to become good in the mystical field, to be able to match the mystic position that Justice and the Hanged Man had assigned him. To do this, Klein will have to pay attention to the recipe for the visionary potion at the next gathering. Or he will go through the conversations between Justice and the Hanged Man to think about how to prepare similar mysterious formulas. After careful calculation, Klein discovered that there were only 4 days left until the appointment with the other 2 people, so he needed to prepare more. At the same time, Klein also decided to find the true cause of the original Klein's death. Then Klein took out the old notebook that the original Klein had written down to look for clues. He hopes that through the notes, the fragments of broken memories will soon be restored. This notebook has been used since May 10th. The first part mainly mentions the school, lecturers, and knowledge. On May 12, the original Klein recorded that teacher Isaac Eggers mentioned that the common language of the Faesac Empire on the southern continent was also a branch of the language of the giants. This gives rise to the speculation that all sentient beings once used the same language. However, this is said to have no basis, or even be completely wrong. Whether in the Apocalypse Night or the Storm Book, it is recorded that in an era even more ancient than ancient times, giants were not the only lords, there were also elves, and there were beast men and dragons. However, teacher Isaac Eggers also concluded that all of these stories are just myths and not true. Then on May 16, the original Klein's notes reported that Associate Professor Quentin Cohen and Professor Isaac Eggers discussed the inevitability of the Age of Steam. Teacher Isaac Eggers believes that this is considered a coincidence. If Emperor Roselle had not suddenly appeared, perhaps the northern continent would still be like the southern continent, still in the era of cold weapons. The associate professor believes that he focuses too much on the effects on the individual. He believes that according to the development of the times, without Roselle the Great, then there was Robert the Great, or others, the age of steam will come later, but will come. Regarding this matter, the original Klein felt that nothing made sense. He likes to discover new things, but at present, it is obscured by the fog of history. Then the original Klein said that he should not major in history, but should study archaeology. Then on May 29, the original Klein recorded that Welch came to find him and reported that he had retrieved a notebook of the 4th century. Welch was not looking for classmates in the same archaeology field but wanted to invite Klein and Naya to help him understand the content of the manuscript. Of course, the original Klein was extremely excited and couldn't refuse, but at that time, graduation was still his highest priority. Along with the original Klein's notes, Klein was extremely excited to read information about the 4th era. The 4th Age, also known as the Epoch of the Gods, is the era before the current Iron Age. Historical information related to it is extremely scarce. Historians and archaeologists can only rely on the vague theological interpretations used to educate the beliefs of the 7 churches as a basis. From there, we were able to piece together a bit of the old status quo of the Solomon Empire, the Tudor dynasty, and the Trunsoist Empire. Reading up to this point, Klein has begun to make judgments about the original Klein's personality, which is that he is a person who values his career, education, and related things only to serve his future. Hybrid later. For example, the original Klein tried to work with Welch when he asked for help. That's because Welch's background was the son of a banker in the city of Constant, London. Welch is famous for his generosity and knows how to treat people, so building a close relationship as a fellow student or rather a graduate student with him will help Klein somewhat in his career advancement in the future. Klein then continued reading the notebook. On June 18, the original Klein graduated from Neuilly University. On June 19, the original Klein saw that notebook. After comparing the structure and root words, the original Klein discovered it was a complication of the ancient Phasac language. More precisely, in its history of more than 1,000 years, the ancient Phasac language has always developed. On June 20, the original Klein recorded that he and the other members read and understood the contents of the first page of the autograph book. The author is a member of the family named Antigonus. On June 21, the original Klein mentioned an unidentified man and said he was referring to the Black Emperor. However, the original Klein believes that this and the inferences about that era are completely contradictory. So the original Klein speculated that teacher Isaac Eggers had concluded wrongly and that Black Emperor was the common title for each emperor of the Solomon Empire. On June 22, the family named Antigonus seemed to have quite a prominent position in the Solomon Empire. The owner of the note mentioned that he had conducted a secret transaction with a person named Tudor. Writing here, the original Klein did not forget to record his question as to whether the name Tudor is related to the Tudor dynasty. On June 23, the original Klein tried not to let himself think about that notebook and stopped going to Welch. At the same time, the original Klein also told himself that the next thing was the interview to become a lecturer, so this was more important than everything else. On June 24, Naya told the original Klein that they had a new harvest. So the original Klein decided to go check out the situation. On June 25, through the newly discovered content, the pen owner received a mission to go to the highest peak of the Hornacis Range, to visit the nation of the Evernight. However, the original Klein believes that this is absurd, because the Hornacis Range is more than 6,000 meters high, so no country can exist. On June 26, the original Klein wrote a short and vague note about some strange things existing. And then on June 27, the words "everyone will die, including myself," were recorded by the original Klein. That is also the end of the notebook. Because in the early morning of June 28, Jo was brought to this world by Ice Guy and reincarnated into Klein. After closing the notebook, Klein learned that to solve the mystery of the original Klein's death, he needed to meet Welch, and then he had to carefully examine the ancient notebook mentioned. However, with experience watching TV dramas and reading many detective stories, Klein knew that if he went to find Welch, there would be a lot of trouble, and even if he wasn't careful, he could lose his life network. So Klein suddenly thought of reporting to the police, but he still didn't know how to meet them. Then, while Klein was wondering, a loud knock on the door suddenly jolted him awake.